thought, I was so mesmerized with trains. And when I was a little girl growing up, my dad and I would go to these places where they'd have all these train displays and everything, and we would just, for hours, watch the trains. He would always get me toy trains at Christmas, and I played with the train tracks and everything. Trains just always were like, wow, I love that. And even one of my great aunts in downtown Winchester, down Broadway, where the train tracks go across, my great aunt Edith lived down that street. She lived right next to the train track. Plus that goes on up and around Depot Street. Those of you who know Winchester know what I'm talking about. And so I would go there with my papa, her brother, my mom's dad, and we'd be at her house hanging out, and I would hear the train coming. And I'd be like, Papa, here comes the train! And I'd run out in the yard, and I'd lay on the grass, watching the train. I just loved it. So, I'm like, what is it with me and these trains? So around 2000, I think it was, and I was really seeking the Lord on some direction. And let me share this with you real quick on that note. Sometimes God, in his infinite wisdom, will allow things that his might could have prevented. Grab that. Now, that was said to me about 6 months after Ashley's death, okay? And I came to realize that we didn't need to watch where the enemy was going to try to take her. It was best that she go home and meet Jesus. And that's what happened. But before that, I want to talk about a situation in me. In 1998, I was in corporate management with Blue Cross Blue Shield. Awesome job. Loved my job. Great benefits, the whole package. That's when they started developing call centers. I'm really telling my age. We had no cell phones, okay? You had no GPS. You did everything the old way. Victoria was 4 years old. We found out like 2 months in advance they were shutting our office down. I worked downtown Lexington, and in the Kentucky office there. Of course, they had an office in Louisville as well. But Ohio, Indiana, and Kentucky, they merged, Blue Cross merged them all together and started a call center in Indianapolis. Hello. And they shut down Ohio and Kentucky and just had one call center, okay? And so managers were given an option that they would pay our relocation, they would pay closing costs on the sale of a home, help us find a home. We were given that option. That was not an option for me. We lived and I raised my girls on the farm where their dad grew up in Owen County, and he had an excellent job too. So we weren't making a move. So I opted and took the other alternative of a severance payout package where I got my full pay for 6 months if I didn't want to do the relocation package. So I opted for that. And as I think about the people that I know now in my life, I would not know you if I had still been in that job. You see what I'm saying? But God. If I hadn't lost that job in 1998, because then I started seeking the Lord on what did he want me to do. And I started homeschooling Victoria and Casey, who was 8th grade. Victoria was getting ready to start. So I started homeschooling. And I was a nervous wreck, because that was a big step, And I decided to do that, and that's when I started my Mary Kay business, so I could work at home and homeschool my girls. Well, God moved in that homeschooling thing, and I ended up I had neighbors that found out, people in the community, if you're going to homeschool, can you help me? I would love to do that, but I can't with my schedule. I'll pay you to homeschool my child. I ended up having a full co-op in my home with 8 full-time students. And it was so funny. I had 4 boys and 4 girls, okay? 2 kindergarten, 2 2nd grade, 2 4th grade, and 2 8th grade. A boy and a girl of each. God is funny. And it was hilarious. Okay? But that's what my passion was, to sow into the lives of those children. And it's awesome because then I got to watch them develop and learn better skills and become stronger, because some of them, they were coming out of public school. And I was blessed in that. But again, those avenues took me to places that I would not have ever gone and experienced and met people had I been at Blue Cross Blue Shield for 30 years. And back then, that's what you did. And people still do that, and that is perfectly fine if that's God's will for your life. That you have a job and you're there for 30 years and you retire, a.k.a. David Dawson back there. That's what he did, where he was. But God blessed me, because here's what happened. So that started in 98, the fall of 98, because the job ended in April of 98, so that fall's when all that started. And Mary Kay, that's why I know Michelle, amen. And so with all that said, also, then I met one of my best friends, Dina Meredith, the third generation owner of King Brothers. And so we met because we were working our Mary Kay businesses together. And so from that, we both started having a passion to sow into the lives of hurting women. So we were seeking the Lord on what we could do. And that's when we started holding our retreats together. And for 11 years, we held retreats and did that together. And then it was time. We both were in agreement. Some things were going on in my personal life. Some things were going on. Her dad wanted her to come to work for the business so he could retire. So we laid down Dressing for Destiny Ministries. And God took us each a different path. But he's brought us back around, and now I assist her with administrative duties in her office. But anyway, with all that said, when I was seeking the Lord and saying, God, what is it about this train thing? What in the world? Why am I mesmerized all my life with these trains? And I'll never forget this. I was sitting up in the middle of the night, and I was prepared for a Bible study that I was going to teach there at the local church the next day. And I'm asking him, and I started seeing tracks, and I'm drawing them out. And the Lord showed me, your train ride is your life journey. So you get on your train at the time you're birthed, okay? And of course, your mom or your dad or whoever's your life then, that's your passengers on your train. And you start through life. And the Lord showed me a track. And that through my life, all the people that were still in my life and on my train ride, that were from the beginning. And then along the journey, how many times, on a train ride, you have what they call a depot, which was a stop along the way. And at every depot stop, some people might get off your train.
Some people get on.
Okay? Some new ones might get on, and some remain right there. Okay? So the Lord just kind of showed me what that vision was about. So when Dean and I, this was, if you don't think God does crazy things, it was 3 o'clock in the morning when I'm doing this. February the 18th. The next day, she and I were talking on the phone. And she said, the weirdest thing happened to me last night. I said, what? And her husband live over off Kobe Road, in Winchester. And she said, I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I've never had this happen before, Deborah. And I heard trains just shoo! They were so loud. And she said, I don't live close to a train track. Well, I started laughing. I said, well, guess what I was doing at 3 o'clock in the morning? God was showing me about my train ride and what the purpose of the train track is. So with all that said, then we started the ministry together, and we called it Dressing for Destiny Ministries. And the purpose of that was, what God showed me is, he is dressing us for our destiny. Layer by layer, ride by ride. People come on, they mentor us, there may be some we mentor, but that's the way, and that's the reason that I talk about the train. So I'm going to back up to the beginning of my train ride, and I'm going to talk about a special lady, AKA my grandma, my mom's mom. She was on that train when I got on at the beginning. Right there she was. And you heard me mention before, see, I was the only red-headed grandchild. So I had the VIP pass. And I was the oldest grandchild. And so it was well known that I was the boss. I let that be known growing up with all my cousins. Because I was grandma's favorite because I had the red hair. That's the way it was. Amen?
Amen.
And so anyway, as part of my train ride, I loved being at grandma's. Loved it. And I'd go stay with her, and I can remember, and if you're familiar with Clark County, where my mom grew up, and the farm this happened on, if you're going out Athens and Bensboro Road, from Fayette County to Clark County, on the right, there's Grimes Mill that you turn off on. Well, back in the day then, there was a little store there, right there across from Grimes Mill. And then there was a drive that went down, and a farm back there, and that's where my mom grew up, and that's where I hung out with my grandma. So we would get the eggs out of the hen house, and we would, I told you last night, I think, that we would, go to the garden, pick the beans, and do everything together, and I was always right by her side. And she would just start singing those songs, one right after the other, So we were like this. And then, unfortunately, at the age of 13, unfortunate for her, she got to go home to Glory Land. I lost my grandma here by my side. The pain. We were so close. So I didn't grow up in a Christian home being taught by my parents, okay? So that's when at the age of 13, where we were living, I started going down to the river, to the church, the little country church, just a little building right up on the side of the hill, and I met Jesus. So all those songs Grandma had been singing with me had planted seed. There's different ways you plant seed.
Yes.
And she planted seed into me through teaching me the hymns that are about Jesus. Amen? And I told you, I think about, my first song that I sang in church was Because He Lives, and so on and so forth. I got baptized in the river. And my mother and my dad's oldest sister, Aunt Ida, got baptized with me. So that was a blessing. So with that train ride, I wanted to just share a little bit of that. We've talked about different things this weekend, and I'm going to bless you. The way we would do it is Grandma would just start singing, and she would just go from one song to the other, one song to the other. And so we've had some mighty worship this weekend, have we not? Yes. But if you're okay with it, we're going to sing some hymns. And I'm just going to start singing some hymns.